Recorded.
Hi, I'm Rowan, and this is Ryan, Madeline, Bianca, and Iffy, and we're going to talk to you today about queerphobia at uni. So we have 5 different categories for you today. We're going to talk about some words to know for our presentation and just in general, pronouns and how you should use them, what not to say to trans and queer people, and why jokes can be harmful.
So as Rowan said, we're going to start with some words that you should know. Trans. Trans describes someone whose gender does not align with their gender/sex they were assigned at birth. Queer. Queer is an adjective and a label for a person who does not identify as heterosexual and/or cisgender. Misgendering someone is referring to people with the wrong gender. A dead name. A dead name is a name that someone is assigned at birth by their parents. It is dead because they no longer use it or respond to that name. Transition. Most trans people choose to transition to affirm their gender identities. Trans people's transitions do not all look the same, and there are many different ways to affirm one's identity, such as changing pronouns, changing names, doing hormone replacement therapy, etc. Intersex. Someone who has mixed sex characteristics that don't align with traditional definitions of male or female. Cisgender. Describing someone whose gender does align with the gender/sex they were assigned at birth. Outing/coming out. Outing someone is accidentally or deliberately disclosing an LGBT person's sexual orientation or gender orientation without their consent. Coming out is an LGBT person's self-disclosure of their sexual or gender orientation.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about pronouns. Okay, so here are some examples of pronouns. Pronouns is just how you refer to someone in the third person without using their name. So the most common ones in English are she, he, and they. And that's what most people use. However, there's something called neopronouns, which are pronouns that are not those 3 pronouns. And these are pronouns that some people choose to use. And 2 examples of them are ze and zer, as you can see in the last 2 rows of this chart. Okay, so why are using the correct pronouns important? So first of all, it shows respect, and it can be really invalidating if you don't use someone's correct pronouns. So there are studies that show that queer people are more likely to self-harm or commit suicide and have lower self-esteem when their correct pronouns are not being used. So how do you use someone's correct pronouns? If you're unsure about someone's pronouns, you can just ask. You can just say, what are your pronouns? When you meet someone, if you're not exactly sure, when you ask what their name is, that's also a great time to ask about their pronouns. Okay, so how to correct others. So I did not make this visual, but I really like it because I think that it just shows some simple steps for when you accidentally misgender someone. So the first step is to calm your defenses. Just listen and be patient. The second step is to apologize and to acknowledge what you did is wrong. So just saying, I'm sorry or I messed up. It's really simple. It doesn't have to be a huge deal. The next thing is to express gratitude if someone corrected you. So it can be hard to correct someone if they misgender someone else. So you can just thank them or say that you appreciate the feedback. And then in the future, it's really important that you commit to doing better because it's really important to use someone's correct pronouns. Now, if you hear someone, go back. If you hear someone use someone else's incorrect pronouns, you can just kindly say, such and such's pronouns are blank. It doesn't have to be a huge deal, and the important thing is that you just move on, but use the person's correct pronouns.
Okay, so this next segment is what not to say to a trans person. So this is a short list. There are definitely more than this, but these are all things that I've personally heard, so I thought that they were common enough to be addressed. So first of all, this is a common mistake, but try to say transgender rather than transgendered. When you say transgendered, it kind of sounds like something happened to a person to make them trans, which is already a relatively common misconception about trans people. And on a similar note, try to say transgender person or men or women or whoever you're referring to rather than transgenders, as this kind of just degrades trans people to their trans identities alone. And it also just kind of sounds weird. Um, it's good to remember that transgender is an adjective and not a verb or a noun. So next, try to avoid asking personal or invasive questions about a trans person's transition. You wouldn't ask a cisgender person random questions about their body, so don't do the same to a trans person. Additionally, avoid asking theoretical questions about transitioning. For example, like um, questions about how a trans person's genitalia might function after sex reassignment surgery or something like that. Since questions like these just kind of make it sound like trans people's bodies are science experiments. Plus, these types of questions can be answered with quick Google searches, so there's really no reason to bring them up to a trans person. Next, dead name. Many trans people would prefer to keep their dead names to themselves, as bringing them up can feel invalidating and triggering, so it can be really upsetting when someone asks about it. Next, the phrase switch genders. Trans people don't switch genders. Different trans people have different views about their identities. Some might refer to their past self as a different gender than the one they currently identify as now, while others might be adamant that they have always been the gender they identify as. But most, if not all, trans people, I think, would agree that they did not just suddenly switch genders, since transitioning is a long process that requires a lot of thought and self-discovery. Next, you don't look trans, or I can tell that you're trans. So please don't tell trans people either of these things. It perpetuates the idea that trans people look a certain way, which is not only degrading, but also just not correct. Additionally, saying that you can tell that someone is trans can be very harmful, as saying this undermines the efforts they've made to affirm their gender identity. And lastly, are you a boy or a girl? So asking this is just kind of rude. It also perpetuates the gender binary, and it's another phrase that, or question that undermines the effort someone has made to affirm their identity. So instead, if necessary, you can politely ask for someone's pronouns, as Madeline said, in order to avoid misgendering them. And as Madeline said, it's good to ask about pronouns when you first meet someone, or you can ask someone privately so as not to put them on the spot in front of a bunch of people about their identity.
So next we're going to talk about things not to say to just queer people generally. The first thing is don't tokenize people. So don't ask them to speak for all queer people or even just their entire community. No one can speak for everyone. And although some people are comfortable talking about their sexual orientation and what it means to them, other people are not. And it's important to respect that and not just always be asking people to be ambassadors. The second thing is making assumptions about them. Don't assume what people do, what activities they participate in, or what they may like because of their sexuality. This also includes assuming that a person likes you when they come out. Not all people of a certain identity group are the same or behave the same or should behave a certain way because of their identity. The third thing is don't comment on people's appearance. Don't say you do or don't look like your identity. The way that people present can have to do with their sexuality, or it can have nothing to do with their sexuality. But mostly other people's presentation is really not your business. And no matter how they look, their identity is valid. So just don't comment on it. The fourth thing is outing people. This is not your information to disclose. People will come out when they feel safe and they feel ready to do that, and you don't get to determine when that is for them. Also, just because someone is out to you doesn't mean that they're out to everyone, so it's important to ask when it's appropriate to bring up their sexuality or gender. Sometimes it's not safe for people to be out to their adults in their family or in their school, so please be aware of this if you are a person who knows about their identity. Always keep in mind it's okay to lie or withhold information about someone's identity or relationships to avoid outing them. Maintaining their safety and privacy is more important. The fifth thing is asking inappropriate details about sex or their sex lives. This is just really weird. Don't ask prying questions about people just because they're queer. It makes some people uncomfortable and is alienating. It's also kind of rude and tokenizing, like we said before. So just don't do it. The last thing is be aware that mistakes happen, but some of these things are potentially very harmful if you say them. So avoiding them is important, even when it might be difficult for you. And it's important to note also that queer people making jokes about their own identities, presentation, or stereotypes surrounding them is not queerphobic, and it does not fit into these categories in any way. So but just because you see queer people speaking this way about their own identities doesn't mean that you have permission to do it if you are not queer yourself.
All right, so here's why jokes can be harmful. So here's some common types of jokes that I've seen around. I've seen a lot of calling things gay, like your mom gay, mom's gay, this is so gay, calling anything that you don't like gay. There's the ubiquitous attack helicopter jokes. I identify as basically any inanimate object, I've seen it. There's also the did you just assume my gender jokes. There's calling asexual people plants. In general, there's just jokes with any kind of stereotype, steer clear of that. I'm sure there's a lot more that I haven't named, but you get that picture. So while these jokes might seem funny to you in the moment, it actually creates a really unsafe environment. You don't know if there's a queer person listening to you that'll hear that and decide this is not a safe person to be out to, or this is not a safe place to be. Jokes can be genuinely hurtful. Just because they don't affect you does not mean that they don't affect someone. And also, I've seen a lot of people go under the defense of dark humor, but just because something's edgy or has shock value doesn't make it funny, and it doesn't necessarily make it okay. There are ways to do dark humor that don't invalidate people or their sexualities. So you may be asking, what do I do if I see this stuff around? Maybe you don't make these comments, but you know someone who does. So you need to take someone aside if you're in person, or message them privately if you're online, and just tell them, hey, this is not okay, or this is what was hurtful about what you said. You can say, please don't use this word, please don't do this, and people will generally listen to you if you don't humiliate them about it, unless they say something really terrible. But a quick and private correction will probably help them understand the impact of their behavior. I hope this has been helpful.